pulled into the parking lot and he ran out. At the time, I didn't understand what it was, but there was like loud sirens, flashing red and white lights.
Welcome to Hope Shot Recovery. I'm Sonia. I'm so glad that you can join me today. Today, I have a really special episode. I have my friend Hannah who's on with us today, and she is the daughter of an addict. And she came to share her experience of what it's like to be a daughter and a loved one of an addict. Thank you so much for joining me today, Hannah.
I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for coming. And this is a hard subject, right? I mean, addiction doesn't just affect the addict, it affects everybody around them and everybody that loves them, and even the people that aren't doing drugs. So I just appreciate you so much for coming on here and sharing your vulnerability. So let's get right into it. So tell me what it was like maybe in your childhood. When did you notice that your mom was an addict?
So, in order to like really understand this, I kind of have to go a little farther back from the original story. So, right before I like found out everything, I was in third grade, so I was about 8, 9 years old, and my grandmother had passed away. And I think that was the big thing that really hit my mom at the time. And it was a really hard time for all of us. And it was the first death that I've ever experienced. So obviously we were all hurting and grieving over that. And then later in the year, I remember being close to about May because my mom was in recovery for the entire summer. She ended up having to go on this business trip. And when she was on this business trip, she told us that she was going to be back by a certain day. And like the day before she was supposed to come home, she called us. She was like, hey, they need me here for one more day. I'll be coming the day after the day she was supposed to be coming back. And she ended up doing that pattern all week. And I remember on Saturday, she said, okay, I'm finally coming back home Sunday night and you're going to see me Monday. I promise. And so I remember Sunday night, my dad, I remember it so vividly. My dad had got his McDonald's and we were sitting at the dining room table when we got a phone from the house line. And my dad's always been like a very serious guy. And so this like look of concern like quickly like washed over his face for a second, and then he was back to his stern look, and he basically just told us like, get in the car, grab your shoes, get in the car. And when at the time we lived in this neighborhood for a couple of years, and there was like this hotel in the neighborhood, and you wouldn't really know about it unless like you lived in the area for a little while. And so my sisters, they tell me sometimes when they talk about the experience that they don't really remember what happened, which is weird for me because I feel like I remember it as if it happened yesterday. And I just remember my dad pulled into the parking lot and he ran out. At the time, I didn't understand what it was, but there was like loud sirens, flashing red and white lights. And my aunt like came out of nowhere and she just came into the back of the car and started comforting my little sister Tegan because she started crying. And I was really confused. I didn't understand what was going on. And then I ended up finding out about like a couple days later that my mom was a drug addict and she was using with one of her coworkers at the hotel. And I remember being really, really confused at first. And like, especially since I was really young, I couldn't fully comprehend it at the time. And so where there was a lack of knowledge, there became anger and loneliness because I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand why my mom had to go to rehab for 3 months. I didn't understand why I could only see her on Sundays and all this stuff. And it made me really upset.
Yeah. Yeah, and totally understandable. And thank you so much for sharing that. So, when all of this was happening, did anybody explain to you what was going on, or did your mom talk to you about it, or your dad talk to you about it?
So at the time, it was mostly my dad because I really only got to talk to my mom when we would visit on Sundays and the phone calls. And so my dad tried to explain this to us. when I got older, I really later found out that this, my mom had had a drug addiction for a really long time, and there was a lot of stuff that my dad tried to do to hide us from knowing what was going on. And I think, not to blame my dad, but I think my dad tried to explain it to me. And the way he explained it to me, it made it sound as if I should be like, mad at my mom. And obviously I should, but just that should be like the only thing. That's like what encompassed me to think about. And so when I was younger, whenever I thought about my mom's drug addiction, it would make me angry. It would make me feel like she put something before us. And it also kind of sucked because I felt like, because of the fact that there was like all this anger and stuff, I had to bottle it up. I think it's where some of my biggest issues came in during that time, is with my mental state, is I started bottling things up, and I tried to play the role of the mom because I am the oldest, and my sisters were in a lot of pain about it as well, and they were also just as confused as I was.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask you next. And just to give everybody some context, you're the oldest sister of two. So you're the third, right? There's three sisters and you're the oldest
Mhm.
of the three. So what was that like for you having to be there for your sisters during that time? I mean, did they understand? Did you guys try
Mhm.
to talk about that?
Well, during that time, Sarah, my sister that's closest to me in age, started going through a lot of mental stuff. I don't want to get too into it because that's her own stuff and her own thing. But she was going through it pretty hard, and basically I felt like I kind of had to, comfort her. Tegan was so little at the time. I don't know how many memories she has of it, but she probably doesn't have many. And I just remember thinking like I had to keep myself together because these guys were already in a mental state, and they didn't need another person to be, carrying their baggage on top of them. And I would like remember just waiting until my sister would fall asleep, because me and Sarah would share a room. I would just remember waiting for her to fall asleep so then I could cry to myself about it, because I was so upset and I didn't know how to properly like, explain my emotions or tell somebody, because I was too worried about carrying Sarah and Tegan's load. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate your vulnerability. So after the initial event happened and then your mom went into rehab, I know your mom, so I know a lot of her story and I know that a lot of her story is going in and out of recovery. So after that
Right.
initial rehab attempt, what happened after that with you guys and her going in and out? How did that affect you?
So, like I said, the first time she went into rehab, I know she went into rehab for about 3 months because I didn't see her until my first day of fourth grade. And I remember sitting there in daycare trying to work on the, first day assignments that they give you, like talk about yourself, draw some pictures and stuff. And I remember like hearing her voice and turning around and like just jumping into her arms with tears in my eyes. I was so excited to see her again. She was clean for probably about like another year and a half, and she ended up using again. So she had to go back into rehab. And it was really hard for us because I knew that she was going to be gone for a while. I wasn't going to get to see her. And those memories of what it was like at first, it was kind of flooded me again. I was really upset about it. And I remember getting that information on the weekend because the next day I went to school and my teacher asked me to grab her something from her classroom. And I went to go do it, and the principal was there, and she saw me and she just started hugging all over me. She was like, "How was your weekend? How are you? Are you doing okay?" And my first reaction to her was, don't you? And she laughed at me and she was like, "Yeah, yeah, I know." And it was really hard again. I feel like over my mom's recovery, I just grew to really hate her. Just me and her did not have the best relationship for a long time. I was really upset because I truly felt like she picked something over me, that I was not her priority. And I felt really lonely because I was stuck with my dad, and my dad's a very stern person who doesn't show a lot of emotions, but when he does, it's usually anger. So he was a very angry person. And so I was so mad at her. I was like, how could you leave me here? How could you choose something over me? And it it hurt. It was a lot of pain, and I bottled it all up, and I started to have a lot of like outlashes because I was bottling up my anger, and then the tiniest things would start setting me off, and I just had so much trouble controlling my feelings. And so my we ended up going into therapy for that. I've done a lot better because of the therapy. So, but there was a long time I did not like going to therapy. So, mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was your age going to therapy and not liking it either, but it actually really helped me a lot. And I'm so glad that you
Yeah.
have that outlet and you had a strong parent in place while you guys were going through that. So I know it was some time, right? And your mom
Yeah.
is clean now and she's doing really well now,
Mhm.
but there was some years before that happened. So what was it like kind of in her last maybe before this time that she got into recovery?
So when she got into recovery, at that point, I kind of like knew the drill. I knew what it was gonna be like. And I just like I said, I was just angry with her about a lot of it. So a lot of times I would snap at her, we would get into a lot of arguments. And my mom at the time, I like I said, I didn't fully understand it, but like she was trying, and with me outlashing at her, she didn't fully get it as well as why I was so angry, which is part of the reason why I ended up going into therapy. And I just remember just always hating her, like she does everything wrong. She doesn't know how to be a good mom. Like why would God even let her have kids? I was just really upset with her. And by that time I was kind of in middle school, so I had like kind of gotten the full picture of it. And I was like so angry in my ways. I couldn't fully see what like a drug addiction was. When I was younger, I truly thought that it was a choice. And I remember saying that to my mom, like you would choose drugs over me any day of the week. And I was just so angry with her. And I remember sometimes we would get to um have these sessions and where we get to do with each other, and it was just always like a big cry fest, and we were always upset with each other. But then this one time we went, and I think it really clicked, and I think that's when it started to my relationship with my mom ended up going for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how has because you said a minute ago that you used to
Mhm.
think that addiction was a choice, but I believe that you've changed that thinking now. Like, how has
Mhm.
your understanding of addiction and recovery grown over this process?
Right. So I found out about my mom's drug addiction at a very young age, and in a lot of ways, I feel like because of that, it kind of stripped my childhood from me. And so when I was young, I was trying to understand big topics that I couldn't fully understand. And so when I was first starting off learning about drug addiction, sorry, um, I was obviously taking it from the point of view of an 8-year old compared to now how I'm 16 and I have a wide knowledge on drug addictions um and an understanding on it. And so when I was little, though, I didn't have that, obviously. So I tried to understand it the way that I could. And so when I was younger, it sounded to me like, oh, well, you're picking something, you're choosing something, you're picking to do a drug instead of spend time with me, you're picking to go smoke instead of coming to one of my sports events and things like that, or you're picking to sleep in all day because you're coming down from doing drugs instead of going to church with my family. And so when I was younger, it made me angry. That was because i I felt like a second choice. And as I've gotten older, though, I've started to realize that after drugs chemically change your body to where you physically cannot choose to not take it anymore, which is why it's important for drug addicts to do the steps so they can learn better coping mechanisms, better ways to keep themselves from go from going out and using again. And I also remember something that I would get angry about was about how my mom would spend all these times in these like all this time in meetings and things like that instead of time that she could be spending with me. And as I gotten older, I realized this is a tool that my mom uses so she doesn't go out and use. And these people are doing the exact same thing my mom is doing. And it makes me proud now that I'm older because I know that she's putting, because by going to these meetings, by doing the steps and all that work, she's putting me first. And I understand that now, that this is how she's putting me first, by putting her recovery first, so then I can be first.
That's right. And I have to say, you are a very well-spoken, smart, and brave young lady. And I just thank you so much for sharing all of this. And I love your perception of addiction and recovery because you're 100% right. So tell us, well, what is your relationship with your mom like today?
Today, I feel like my mom and me, we're obviously mother and daughter, right? But I feel like she's one of my closest friends as well. I've have been able to open up with her about a lot of things, and I have an easier time of being able to, because of the therapy that we went through, to being able to figure out what emotions I'm feeling, why I'm feeling them, and how to deal with those in a healthy manner. And because of it, I honestly, because of our relationship, I like going out and seeing what she does with her halfway houses, because she has halfway houses, and just getting to see like these are people that were like my mom, and to see how much she's grown over the time, and how she used to be from point A, like I can see the point A and see where she is today. And I'm really proud of her because of her growth, and I'm really proud of the work that she's doing because she's helping people like her to build a better foundation for themselves. And I love my mom. I wouldn't know what to do if I had and didn't have her. So
Oh, I love that so much. And just to let everybody know, so now her mom is the CEO of some houses called Grace Recovery. And I believe they have 5 houses. And sometimes you come and you help her and you participate in bringing in
mhm.
like a church service to them or a meeting to them. And I've even heard you sing, which you have a beautiful voice, by the way.
Thank
Um,
you.
so, okay, one more question.
Okay.
So if there's somebody out there, whether it's a parent or a child, or even just a loved one of somebody who's in their addiction, or maybe even new in recovery, what advice or encouragement would you give to them?
So if I was coming from the standpoint, if I were to go back in time and go to my 8-year-old self and just look at myself and see the pain that I was going through at the time, I would want to say that, as cliche as it sounds, it's gonna get better. It can only go up when you hit rock bottom. And it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt really badly. But the more you bottle that pain up, the harder it's gonna be. And the more walls that you put up, the harder they are to break down. And so basically, I would say keep your guard up, but be supportive, because when somebody that you love goes out in recovery, it means they're trying to do better. And to understand that that they, just because a person may not be spending as much time with you, or because you don't get to see a person every day, that it doesn't mean that they don't love you and that they don't care about you. And just that, like you said earlier, like drug addiction is kind of like, it affects everybody. It's like a ripple effect, you know and just to let them know that the ripples don't last forever. They eventually will die out. And just to understand that you don't have to be strong in a moment like this. You're allowed to be able to cry, to be upset, and to show your emotions. And just like how drug addicts or alcoholics may go to a meeting to get fellowship and to be able to talk about their issues with others, it's the same way for people without drug addictions or alcohol issues, that fellowshipping with others and maybe going into therapy or talking to somebody that you're feeling comfortable to talk about that stuff with, is a great source and outlet for you, and you'll benefit from it. I can guarantee it.
Wow. Thank you so much. And again, I just want to tell you, I admire your courage and bravery that it took to come on here and speak so
Mhm.
vulnerably and to really, I know this video is going to help somebody. So I just thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Hannah. And thank you guys for watching. And we'll see you again on Hope Shot
Mhm.
Recovery.